Welcome to this episode of Life Science Success. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don, and I am a digital marketer in life sciences. And so today, my guest is Karen Tkaczyk. Karen is a director of sales at Vistatec with a remarkable background in chemistry and translation, with a PhD from the University of Cambridge and extensive experience in both scientific research and language services. So, with that, welcome, Karen. It's great to have you on the podcast.
It's great to be here, Don. I'm so glad that we met in the real world and are now taking it to your podcast. Happy to
That's
be
right.
here.
Yeah, it's not that often that I get out in the real world and then bring back and come back and have people want to join. But yeah, occasionally conferences, and then in this case we have a nice little gathering in Colorado. So um, yeah, I'm glad to have you here. It'll be great to kind of dive in and talk a little bit about you and your background and things. Why don't we just start there? Can you tell me a little bit about what brought you to life sciences? What made you want to be in this field?
Yes, so I was a little girl in the UK who loved science and loved languages. You know, as a schoolgirl, I love, people say, "What's your favorite subject?" I loved science, I loved languages, and I've always loved both. As I was going through middle school and into high school, I narrowed that down a bit and I loved chemistry. And French was the most obvious language available to me, although I have studied others. So I was trying to keep that going all the way through my studies, all the way through high school and into college. My undergraduate degree well, it was called chemistry with French. So in US terms, that's a double major or a major in chemistry with a minor in French. Who knows exactly which? But I managed to keep that going. I managed to keep that love of both science and language going. And that degree included an internship that I did in a pharma company in France. So that included living in France for a year and so I was still combining the two. Went on to do a PhD in organic synthesis, asymmetric synthetic methodology, um, and that research process. It was an amazing experience and all that, but I knew very quickly that I needed to get out of the ivory tower and into development, into production, into the real world. I was enjoying the chemistry. I considered areas other than pharma while I was studying. I looked into, fast moving consumer goods, other kinds of chemistry. But I ended up in big pharma as a development chemist. At that, my first job was with SmithKline Beecham just before it merged and became GlaxoSmithKline. So
Hmm.
I was in one of their sites in Dublin. So that's sort of how I got into chemistry in the real world, big pharma. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
And,
always interesting to hear how these things weave together as well.
mm,
How did your experiences in development as a chemist in Ireland and the US as well shape your
mm.
career? And what were some of the key lessons that you learned?
Yeah. So I moved. The first job was a temporary. So I moved to a permanent job with Bristol Myers Squibb again in Ireland, and it was all set. But that's where the personal and the professional kind of blended. My husband and I immigrated to the US. So I got married and moved. He was a software developer. So for those of you who are aware of the visa system, it was very easy to get in on an H-1B visa at that time. Well, very easy. It's all relative, but hey, we came here on that. So I ended up in northern Nevada, not a hotbed of of, uh, of any
No?
sort of chemical industry, but there was a private label manufacturer there, and I worked, and they made cosmetics and topical medical devices. So by think wound gels and other product, medical devices. That it's formulation chemistry. So I grew immediately into being exposed to the whole world of formulation chemistry rather than small molecule drug development, which had been my career until then. Uh, and I mean, all through the industrial jobs, first in Ireland and then in Nevada. I mean, I was growing. It was development work. It was scale up. It was validation batches. Doing the night shift, being the chemist responsible on the night shift for validation batches on in the manufacturing plant, and then formulation chemistry. The difference between private label work and having to sell to end clients. That was I had never considered that sort of scenario. Cosmetics. Topical medical devices, all sorts of different regulations, exposure to I was more familiar with what goes on in the EU, and then I was being exposed to the US regulatory system. My first ISO audit. I ended up being a quality assurance manager in one of those in that cosmetics company in Nevada. So my first prepping for an audit, being audited, the first couple of audits. So all of that was a great period of growth and learning. And I wouldn't say you asked about challenges. I would say my biggest challenges at that time were the personal, right? I got married, we immigrated, then we had our first child. The professional was pretty just a growth phase and learning and exciting and seeing what was really out there in industry rather than that academic focus which had been my background for years before that. So that would be that's what I think of when I think back to that time.
So I also saw that you were at Macmillan as well. So
Well,
it just interested, to hear.
yeah,
I guess, kind of because I feel like your journey
yeah.
goes from life
There's
sciences
a
to on the fringe to way
yes.
off
Let me
the
explain.
radar and then all the way back on again. So yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so Macmillan Translation was my company. Macmillan's my middle name. So I had we had children, right? I said, and that company that I was working for also went bust. So long story short, when I had three children under four, I was looking for something to do, and I realized that there was a world of freelance of translation, localization. So this world of language services that I am now in. And those companies need subject matter experts, right? And bilingual people. I think I may have omitted along the way that husband I married, I met him on that year in France, that internship when I was 19. So there's a bilingual thread along the way that I had missed, I hadn't said. So that love of languages, love of science, I was still cultivating both, even through a move to the US. So I became a freelancer, a self-employed, a contract linguist, and I had subject matter expertise. So suddenly, all the global language services industry is like, "Oh, can you just handle this cosmetic account for me? This pharma, this you name it, I've seen it, and I did it for millions of words." For 15, I think it was 17 years actually, while my children were small and until I was almost an empty nester, I was a self-employed freelance translator, an editor, a trainer of translators, a trainer of linguists. I did a lot of public speaking and training about the intersection of life sciences and the language services industry. And some of your listeners are currently thinking, wait, what is the language services industry? So we're talking about translating, literally putting everything into other languages. I'm not talking about translational science, which some people ask me about at this
All right.
point. I'm talking about global business. I'm talking about companies, you know, conducting clinical trials all around the world and having to speak to patients in that language. I'm talking about submitting drug master files and INDs in the language that is not your corporate language and having to have all the documentation translated, or simply doing business around the world, or have been part of a global company that has to translate its internal contents and communications. So I translated millions of words in an immensely broad range of nice life sciences content. In the translation world, I'm considered highly specialized because I only translated you know, life sciences broadly, science broadly. I didn't do legal or financial or some other topic that I'm not an expert in. Um, and that's what I did for a long, long time. And then there was a pandemic and I was becoming an empty nester. And then I decided to, well, wondered what I was going to do when I grew up, just like a lot of us did. A lot of us reflected during that period. And I decided to look at being employed again. And I went initially, at least with, I went to one of these global language services companies that I had been freelancing for so many years.
And so
You
do
can't
you?
plan this life. You can't.
Yeah. So did you primarily just translate English to French or French to English, or
Other
did you
way.
translate?
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
Yeah, so French to English. So
Hmm.
I did some Spanish to English along the way, but professional linguists translate into their native language.
Okay.
So I was translating a great deal of content for French companies
Hmm.
into English for their US partners, employees, you name it. In the life sciences world, people would often think of clinical trials as well. I did the back translation piece, clinical trials. That will be familiar to some of your listeners. Um, but yeah, so my clients were either the chemical companies themselves or life sciences companies themselves. I mean, or they were the language services companies middleman, if you like. If they were very big global corporations, they wouldn't work directly with someone like me. But yeah, just French. And as somebody once said, how's there enough work for in that chemistry translation? Karen, there's so much work. I was kept very busy and had a very successful career for many years. So it was a wonderful, wonderful, flexible, challenging career. I learned every day because I read new documents every day and I translated them and I became an excellent technical writer. Even if really at a pinch I can do Marcoms for life sciences too, but my happy place is as a scientific or technical writer doing regulatory content or content for information internally and all that kind of thing. So that's what I did for a long, long time.
Very interesting. So, I mean, I guess again, so you kind of talked about the fact that you started in the life sciences, you sort of found your way to the fringe, and then back to life sciences again. But I mean, so now whenever you go to Vistatec, I mean, your role is not having to do with any of this stuff other than like business development or sales. So I'm curious now, like what led you to want to do that part of it?
Well, I often call myself the accidental salesperson.
Hmm.
So I went to another company in the interim. Vistatec's the second in company I've been employed by, if you like, since that transition. But I decided I went basically. I like people, and I wanted to go into account management or something customer facing. And the first role I had was a mix of that, just that, a strategic account management and some bit light biz dev. Um, but I wasn't only handling life sciences. So that made me unhappy. I wanted to be handling only life sciences accounts. And I have this unusual combination of expertise, right? I have this unusual breadth of understanding of life sciences. I have depth of understanding of the translation and localization industry and what it takes for companies fundamentally to successfully do global business, to successfully exist globally and to do all they need to do. And that's a valuable expertise. So that means that I mean, I help companies get set up properly. I mean, yes, it's biz dev, but it's more about just finding people have a need and they need to find the right partner. And when I'm the right partner, we develop the right solution. It's that kind of biz dev. It's not cold calling kind of biz dev, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I tell people all the time, I definitely am I'm a relationship salesperson myself, right? So I mean, I can only do the sales side of things if it comes along with the relationship. If you and I, don't match at any level or whatever, I'm fine
Yeah,
with sort of leaving things alone and moving on because there's got to be somebody out there where the things that I say and the things that you need match. And so that makes a lot of sense to me as well. Let's talk a little
completely
bit about
agree.
let's talk a little bit about Vistatec.
Yeah,
So I hadn't, I mean, until we met, right? I hadn't really heard of
yeah,
Vistatec
yeah.
before. This
Let me
isn't
tell
something,
you.
a service
Yeah.
that I frequently
Uh,
had to buy. So curious to hear
yeah.
more.
Yes, so Vistatech's a global content solutions provider, right? A language trans content provider. It's headquartered in Dublin, Ireland, which is probably why you hadn't heard of it. It's been stronger and better known in Europe than it had for longer. It's about 27 or 28, I don't know exactly, something of in the 20s years old, long established and originally very strong in tech, became stronger in life sciences, I don't know, halfway through that existence and gradually built that up. And then more recently split off the life sciences uh, division into a business unit with a formal QMS and supply chain management and all the things that one might need for compliance in that makes for easy selling into the life sciences space. I told you I was a freelancer, right? I worked for many language services companies over that time when I was a freelancer, and I know the good, the bad, the ugly, and the
Mhm.
indifferent. I know what mediocre looks like. I know what excellent good looks like. So I chose to move to one where I could stand by what we're doing, what they were doing before I joined, but what we're doing. So I went to one that I feel is a model, is a best of breed, and yep, not as well known as some of the giants, but it's a significant global business. We have employees in about 20 countries around the world. We have significant programs at scale. Yeah, so that's Vistatech, and I got there because a current employee found me, came across me as part of a networking thing, and invited me for lunch, and then referred me for a role. So I've got the position through my network, um, and uh, and they're very they're full of smart people. I enjoy being here.
It's really interesting to me that that's what you said, is that, you more or less connected with this role via networking, because I was talking to somebody earlier today, and they happened to mention the same sort of scenario. They were, had a longer career, they'd been around for a while. They said, "Hey, look, the my job search essentially is going to equate to a lot of networking, and then eventually I'll connect with somebody that knows of something that
Hmm.
will lead me somewhere." And I found it interesting because I mean I've seen the opposite, where somebody will send in hundreds and hundreds of resumes and then just essentially hear nothing, right? Because
Yeah.
they get filtered out along the way.
Yeah, well, I've often said, build your network before you need it, right?
Mm.
That's a piece of advice I've given to people many times over the years. And I wasn't looking when this person knew that Vistatech had a need. I wasn't looking. I was fine where I was, but they approached me, and I agreed to have a conversation, and then I decided to make the leap. But yeah, if you don't have a network, I mean, yeah, you gave the example of how it seems to work on LinkedIn these days. And yes, I would. It's easy for me because I like people. I like making friends. I like talking to people. But I know it's a much tougher ask for different personality types. But even though I have three adult kids, they have varying personalities, and I would tell all of them, you know, build your network now, start now. You never know who's going to show up in some role in 10 years or 20 years, and you're connected to them on Facebook, or you've been Instagram friends forever. And they can't tell that, they can't imagine that, but we can look back now and see that it was someone that you met there then at that you happened to sit beside at lunch, or you once had a monthly meeting with. We all know what it looks like a long time later, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny because the bigger that my network gets, I can recall certain points about a person, but I oftentimes have to sort of scour through my connections to try and remember, like, who specifically is this? I know that they're
Mhm.
somewhere in my network, and I know that their name could be close to this or that, but I oftentimes I can't. I mean, I can't remember names like I used to. That's for sure.
I'll admit to that. I'll admit to the. I'm sure it began with a C, or
Right.
sure it was a. It was a Scottish name. It was a Mick name or whatever it was. Yes, no, you're absolutely right. You can't always remember, but some people stick in your mind and you stay in touch with some people, right?
Right.
Sometimes you go out for a business meal. I can think of one right now. I was in London on business last September, and I had a dinner. And by the end of the dinner, we were way beyond the normal level of business conversation. We'd made a personal connection and
Mhm.
we were friends, right? And when that happens, you don't forget it, right? You
Right.
stay friends,
Yeah.
and that sometimes happens. And I can think back to other examples of certain people in certain moments. And then there's yes, those other ones that are a bit vaguer, but you never know.
Such an
Yeah.
important point, though. I think especially now because I think this the day of shallow rapid fire sort of connections, and I say this each time that I connect to somebody on LinkedIn as well that look the connection part is fine, but I'd like to like
Mhm.
know you a bit more so that essentially if I can help you or you can help me, let's at least answer some basic questions about each other. So,
Yes, let's
because otherwise, I won't
understand.
even be able to do anything.
Right. And you won't remember the person later. Somebody will say, "Could you introduce me to so and so?" And you look at so and so. I'm like, I have honestly have no idea where I met them. None. No recollection of how I became connected to this person. And that's not good. So well done, you, Don, for trying to avoid
let's
that.
let's talk a little bit more about Vistatec. So,
Yeah, sure.
let me ask you, how is Vistatec unique? How do you support your clients, and what value do you bring to the partnerships?
Yes. So we're, as I said, we're a global content solutions provider. So fundamentally, we are helping them do business when they can't do business in the language that they want to do business in, right? So you can do that cheap and nasty, or you can do it well. You could do it so that the readers in the other language don't realize that the content was ever in another language beforehand, or you can do it in a way that everybody knows a machine did it and wonders if a human ever took a peek. So we're a best of breed on that version. On the scale of those, we're one of the quality ones. Um, we don't just translate. Some of you will be familiar with the the idea of localization, which is adapting a product or content to a given
Mm.
localization, a specific locale or market, so that you edit things. You can't always sell the same way to the UK and the US or to Canada and Australia, right? If we only even think about English, so you multiply that by Arabic and Spanish and think about all the flavors and French and think about what that takes. So we help people achieve that. That's what we're doing, and we're helping people go to market in new locales. We're helping people get products approved, right? Regulatory products, through the regulators. Where when I narrow it down to life sciences, it could be clinical content, it could be Marcom, it could be product teams, it's the full product life cycle from design and concept and technical files all the way through patient facing copy and corporate websites. Really imagine any communication you might make in English, and then we might be localizing it for any other market or any other regulatory body or any other patient community, so to speak. That's really what we're doing. That's how that's what we're doing. And I help the life sciences division grow, and I manage some strategic accounts along the way. Um, yeah, so we do serve other domains. I have colleagues who are tech or engineering
Sure.
or fintech or retail or we but I'm strictly in our life sciences business unit, and
So
that's where I work.
do clients, whenever they come to you, I'm just trying to picture our industry, right? So I would
Hmm.
imagine there are probably a variety of triggers that cause clients to come to you. One being, hey,
Hmm.
look, there's a new market that we're exploring, blah, blah, blah. We want to,
Hmm.
kind of translate things,
Yeah.
for that. But also it could be, there's this brand new thing that, is about to come out that we're still working on. We need to make sure that
Mhm.
our labeling, matches exactly, where it's going to go to make
Yep.
this easy. Is
Mhm.
that what it looks like whenever people come to you? Is those
Yeah.
kind of the two scenarios, or is
Yeah.
there anything else that
There's
would
more
stand
than
out?
that. Those are absolutely
Mhm.
normal scenarios. What would other scenarios? We've got, as let's say a CRO comes to us, we've got a new trial. The sponsor's given us a new trial, and they've got a site in Canada.
Mhm.
We've only ever worked in the US, and they had Spanish already because they were working in the US. They needed some Spanish, but suddenly they're going into another country, and so there you go. Suddenly they need French as well. And they had in-house people who could help with Spanish, or so that can go way beyond. That was this very simplest example, a global clinical trial. Suddenly it's in 10 countries and there's 13 languages in those 10 countries. And so there's an example from clinical. You gave the labeling example, regulatory affairs, even before labeling, submission to the
Mhm.
regulatory bodies in the country, and depend, if you're thinking medical devices, you will well, anyone who thinks about medical devices knows about EU MDR and the delays and the mess and the wondering. And one of the things that MDR does is bring translation earlier in the process, pre-approval. So suddenly people have to get it translated into however many of the 23 languages of the European Union before it's approved. And each country within the EU has there's a sort of matrix of which documentation has to be translated into, I don't know, Bulgarian, and which can be left in English. So typically, there are some locales where you can leave clinician facing content in English and you only have to translate the patient facing content. And then there are other locales where everything has to be translated. So it's that kind of, okay, suddenly they have 23 languages and they don't know which set has to be translated into this and which anyway. So there's a lot of you can imagine the complexity when you're suddenly talking about many languages. Then we have a huge number of SaaS type things. So think of
Mhm.
SaaS for life sciences. So they have a new app, they have a new product, they have a software launch. Software UI can't always be in English, right? So we're localizing software for whichever locales they're selling into. And I could go on and on and on, but
Very interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
those you can. It could be just a contract. We're trying to do business with this company in South Korea. We've never done business in South Korea before. Karen, help! So, um, you know, yeah, you name it, and then it can get really technical. It can be technical specs. It can be, it can be. Imagine a batch record that for a batch that went wrong, so that's a non-conforming batch record. Those ones all need to be translated into for the regulatory body of whoever's examining and auditing the batch record. And there's in the bad old days there were handwritten notes on the side, right, before electronic batch records.
Oh, wow.
So
Yeah.
you name it, could be hundreds of pages of PDF of a tender, that someone wants to complete a tender and they say, can we need the tender translated so we can even answer the questions.
Hmm.
There's a myriad of, I could go on for quite some time about the use
Well,
cases. There's a lot. So
Well, and I think it's important to talk about because, right, I mean, somebody may be thinking, hey, look, this is only big documentation projects, right? Not necessarily
yeah,
thinking, hey,
not at
look,
all.
this could apply to tenders as well, right? So I think it's
You name it.
important to talk about both. Um, you mentioned artificial intelligence a little while ago. How do you see it impacting your world? And then also, are you seeing it being used, inside of Vistatech as well?
Yeah. So it's a question I'm often asked. In fact, it's the first question a lot of people ask me when they don't know our industry and they meet me. So we've been using machine translation, which is a form of AI, for decades, right? Or wondering about it, starting to use it, deciding whether it was reliable or not. So our industry's kind of ahead of the curve on that hype curve.
Mm-hmm.
Wherever we are on that hype curve and into some other part of the curve now. Um, so as a service provider, our innovation tends to be around workflow and use of technology, right? That's tends to be what's going on, um, to the extent that is safe in our risk averse industry, right? Our world of life sciences is risk averse. We're not the early adopters for these things. However, so yes, of course, we consider what we're doing with AI. We have a whole team that handles that, that
Mhm.
handles use cases where our clients want us to uh, trial it, demo it, pilot it, test it out, look at various engines, look at what's going to compare and contrast different solutions. Um, so we use AI in a number of ways for workflow assistance, like many people are doing these days. And for some programs where we and the clients have worked together and found solutions that work. We uh, It varies entirely on the client, from client to client. We have clients who mandate that we do not use AI in any way, shape, or form, right? So we've got programs where it's 100% human all the time, and we don't, and they'd fire us if we did anything other than that. And we've got other clients who are either cost conscious or they're tech savvy, and they want to work with us on finding a solution that can be reliable. So I would say two things. One is there's always a human in the loop. I mean, unless you're talking about a chat bot on your corporate website when nobody cares, there's always a human linguist in the loop reviewing the content, because there's nothing that we're talking about risk to life and limb in our world, right? We're not talking about the product description of a new pair of jeans being odd, right? We're talking
Mhm.
about risk to life and limb. So there's a time and a place for machine translation and use of large language models. Uh, so so yeah, I mean it's out there. Yes, we use it. Yes, we have teams that use it, and we have clients who absolutely don't use it. We recently had an event in Dallas, actually. It was just last week or the week before, Unlocked. So that's a pun for any localization, unlocked anyway. Only people in our industry get the pun, where we discussed AI in depth with,
Mhm.
industry colleagues and clients. So, it's out there. Of course, it's a big deal. And I would say the tech space is way further ahead in terms of adoption, and our tech clients are way further ahead in terms of adoption than the life sciences clients, if I were to generalize. It- you know, so
Yeah, I mean, the part that I oftentimes sort of, relay to clients as well is just this idea that, look, it gives us on the content marketing side a jump start. It's not the easy button, because if I truly just, put it in and counted on it being 100% right, it's
mhm,
not going to be, and it's going to misrepresent some of the things either for your brand or whatever. It's not something that we would typically do. And so, a
yeah,
similar sort of conversation I'm having on my side, and
yeah,
clearly I don't have the background that you have in terms of
yeah.
using
It,
this either.
it, you make my point, because what language do you think has the most research into
Yeah, right,
AI?
exactly.
English,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
So English is going to give you the best results.
Mm,
So if you pick another major global language like Spanish or Chinese or German, where a lot of research might have been done, the results might be similar. They might be halfway okay once a human's polished it, kind of thing, or possibly not, but they might be. But then think about the languages of the Southern Hemisphere. Think about, I mean, companies, those that one of the software apps that I was thinking of when I gave you an example of software localization, that's in 120 languages. So how many of those 120 languages you're not even getting that head start in
right.
some of those languages. So yes, it can be useful. And when I talked about pilots and considering for various programs, they may say it's working for this language, and this language, and it's not working for all of those. And it's going to take
Mm,
years because there's not enough data in those languages, right? And I'm not going to pick on any languages, but you can all imagine the world's major languages and the world's less, languages of limited diffusion, we call them, the world's small languages. There's not the body of information, so the machines can't do a good job at all. So in those cases, sometimes the linguist will say it's not worth it. It's not saving me any time. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
So so you make my point beautifully.
good to have the experts always. So how do you I mean, we touched on this a little bit, but I do want to see if there's a little deeper that we could go with the topic. But how do you balance the need for innovation with the regulatory and ethical considerations that come with advances in life sciences?
Mm. Well, sometimes the regulators mandate use of a human. For instance, in the USA, in healthcare, you're not allowed to present translated documentation that hasn't seen a human, right? You can't just
Mm,
use MT and give it. So the regulators are limiting in some places the innovation, you might say, or the attempts at cost cutting, or however you want to put it, right? So sometimes, um, uh, and on the other hand, in some places, the regulators are part of the innovation. The EU has a translation service. It's a
mm,
massive buyer, you can imagine. And they are working on some of those innovative things. So it's a mix and match. How we balance it personally is that we have a very strong quality management system and our quality assurance processes are strong. So if anyone ever tells us it wants us to innovate in terms of using an LLM or something, we wouldn't allow things to be delivered without having decided what the quality management process for that was and what the level of checks was, and like I mentioned earlier, there's always a human. Synthetic voiceover is pretty good these days. You can imagine taking a transcript of this podcast and a machine translating it into, let's say, Chinese, and then a Chinese linguist could polish that transcript, and then we'd put it into synthetic voiceover, and then your listeners could listen to us in Chinese. That can happen with the use of AI, but this isn't a life-threatening situation, right? This is just you and
right.
me on a podcast, right? So you can. So it's just a bit of a balance, and as I've said, some of our clients are extremely risk averse and put their foot down in one way or the other, and others are more inclined to innovation. So, as a service provider, we're often driven by what the client states, and then if we happen to know that they're going perhaps against what a regulator in a certain locale is known to prefer, we might tell them, but it's their decision.
Yes,
Did
yeah.
I
I mean,
answer your question?
you did. So for
Okay.
anybody though that is interested in sort of seeing synthetic voiceover, maybe
Mhm.
you're wanting to experiment with it or whatever. My favorite place to go for this in the world is Notebook LM with Google. So it's my
Okay.
favorite place to go because then you can in Notebook LM. You could sort of upload a bunch of documents about a topic that you're interested in, and then you can click the podcast button, and it has two people, it has a male and a
Oh
female
yes,
voice
it
that
turns
sort of
them into.
banter back and forth. It's the same
Yeah.
thing over and over again. So, I mean, you could pick it out pretty quickly once you've heard it once, but it is for me, it's a very interesting, very interesting
Yes.
thing to see.
I've
So,
seen examples of that. And we actually have, I actually have a proper demo of that. If anyone wants to see one that's actually been polished and professional, we do have a proper example of what synthetic voiceover sounds like, because it's practical. It's an example where getting a voice actor in every locale where you need another language is very expensive. They have to have a soundproof studio, and then if you make updates next year, you have to get that same voice actor back or redo the whole thing. Whereas if it's synthetic voiceover, you just tweak it the next year, run the synthesis through again on a tight, with the small edits you've made, perhaps to whatever the script is. So it's one area where we've been using AI more successfully than some others. That's one that jumps out at me.
Very good. So I mean, I used to be a global leader in big corporate America and flew all around the world. And one of my favorite things to do is essentially telling stories through food. And so I'm very curious to hear, what is your favorite French meal?
Ooh, ooh, that's a tough question, Don. How do I say? Okay, I'm going to say the favorite thing that we make all the time at home is
Mm,
crepes.
okay.
Okay,
Yep.
so
Yep.
I make crepes like American mums whip up a bunch of pancakes. American moms, I can't do the accent. American mothers whip up a bunch of pancakes for breakfast on a Saturday morning. I make crepes for dessert and for main course anytime. So that's one that comes to mind. And then if I'm out, it would be truite aux amandes. So it'd be trout,
Mm,
roasted trout with almonds, a creamy almond sauce.
hmm.
That's one I don't get to make very often in landlocked Colorado. Although I'm sure I know we can get good trout here occasionally. But yeah, there's two for you.
Yeah, I've been a beef bourguignon fan for a long
Mhm.
time, so that's kind of my one go-to. But
I
yeah,
have a beef
always interesting.
bourguignon recipe. Yep, I don't eat much red meat, but I have a beef bourguignon recipe that I pull out in the winter, make a nice hearty red wine beef stew. That's a winner. Good choice. Good choice.
Very good. What about favorite Irish meals? Since you spent time there too, so let me
Really
ask that
good
question.
Irish meals. The scones, the
Ah, yeah.
breakfast scones. Ireland was really good at scones. Also, breakfast generally. I'm Scottish, so I lean slightly to a Scottish cooked breakfast over an English or an Irish, but that's a subtle nuance for most of your listeners. But yes, scones in Ireland, they were massive, huge soda bread oh, yeah. There you go.
Very good. All right, last three questions. What inspires you?
So on one level, seeing the people I love achieving their dreams, their
Mm,
goals, that inspires me. On another level, I love springtime. We're just at that time here where the buds are coming on the trees, seeing new growth outdoors. That inspires me. And majestic mountains and crashing waves will do it too. Like give me Big Sur or sit me on a ski lift. I can't but think about the important things in life when I'm watching that kind of majesty.
that's for
Um,
sure.
yeah.
Next question, what concerns you?
So, assuming we leave geopolitics aside in this context, um, I suppose um, people who go through life without thinking
Mm,
concern me. I don't claim to be a thought leader or any great uh, model on that front, but there's a lot of I see a lot of people going through their lives without critical reflection. And I think
mm.
that self evaluation and critical reflection and thinking about why do we think what we think? Why do we believe what we believe? How did we come to believe what we believe? I think the lack of that concerns me.
Yeah. I mean, it's so important. It is the one thing that I felt like. I mean, it's funny to me because I've had people, and I don't know if you've had this happen or not, but I've had this conversation with people where they'll say, "Hey, look, I could have gotten a PhD here or there, and but
Mhm,
I didn't go, or I didn't finish, or I didn't whatever."
mhm.
And I'm like, right, but so then you don't have the PhD. That's fine. You have other ways to sort of critically think and critically evaluate things.
Oh, for sure.
I felt like I had a level of critical thinking naturally when before I even had my PhD, but then sort of you learn this other level of like slicing things till you're just tired of looking at the same topic over and over again, but it teaches you sort of this, like, make sure you look at it head on, from the bottom, from the top, from the sides, all the corners.
You're
I
taking me
feel like
back, Dawn, to things I don't want to think about anymore.
there you go.
But yes,
But
you make a beautiful point. Yes, and I wasn't even uh, thinking about my education, but you're
mm,
right. I had a good education and I was taught to think. and we consciously made sure our kids were taught how to think and, therefore make decisions. I suppose I've just been thinking, about the state of the world and
Yeah.
wondering if people are
No,
thinking much, so
but I do
it's very,
think it's, I mean, whether it's, whether it's any of the current topics in the geopolitical environment or it's anything else, you're bringing up a really good point that essentially, um, perspective or the ability to
yeah.
critically think is that sort
Yeah.
of ability to not just challenge but even just sort of question, like, why is it that this thing is sort of progressing one way or the other. So yeah, a
Mhm.
very important point. Last question: what excites you?
Well, you handed me this one on a plate, Don. Opportunities like this to talk to interesting people and share ideas. I like getting to know people. I like talking with smart people. I like with all kinds of opinions because I grow and I learn when we talk. So I love this kind of thing. So I'm delighted that you invited me to play along. And yeah, that was funny when I saw your question, what excites you, and it's true. I love this. But hey, there you go.
I appreciate that because I mean, it was one of the, I mean, I don't know what the transfer for you from corporate America to being a solo consultant was like. But for me, it was terrifying because essentially I was leaving big corporate America where I was always connected to thought leaders. And I said this to somebody. I said, look, I mean, what do consultants do so that they all of a sudden are not somebody that's by the wayside kind of speaking to themselves because all of their knowledge that they used to have is gone because
Mhm.
of the fact that it's outdated. And they said,
Yeah.
look, we connect with people. And somebody in one of these sort of conversations happened to say to me, I wish I would have recorded it. And I'm glad that they did because it instantly in my head that was like, well, why wouldn't I record that for everybody? I mean, I wouldn't record it for myself because I'm not going to go back and
Hmm.
listen, but I will certainly record it for everybody else if they're interested in listening. So that's what brought us here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very
Lovely.
good. Well,
Yes.
Karen, thank you so much for joining me on the Life Science Success Podcast. I really appreciated you being here and for telling us about Vistatec and all the things that you do. It was such an interesting conversation, and I wish you well.
Thank you, Don. Thank you for having me.
Thanks a